Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for being with us today. We are covering the entire morning, and we have later on in another room at the theater another session. But I want to express my sincere and deep gratitude to all these friends, and obviously to Feriel to have accepted to moderate, because, you know, for those who are aware, normally Feriel is a keynote speaker of everything, but now she is moderating this incredible panel of technology of traceability. Traceability is the essential element of what we do. We work on that, we study, we, as an industry, as a whole, certify. We try to give all the possible knowledge on that. And again, to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, my very deep appreciation, because I think it's the first time ever that you are all on stage together. So if you want to say nice things this time. No, well, apart that, but thank you very much to each one of you for the incredible job that you are doing towards the industry, because we all need all of you. And I would like to thank Feriel to be here with us. And unfortunately, I mean, despite your health condition, you are here because we know what's happened. This is winter time, and because the climate change is quite cold or quite hot, such as in this room, and obviously I hope that all of you are comfortable. But in any case, thank you very much for moderating this incredible panel. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaetano. Thank you. So as you can all hear, my voice is strained. I can say that there was some dancing and some karaoke last night, but I didn't partake, yet I'm the one that's lost my voice. And that's a fact, actually. So I'm so honored and actually privileged to be moderating the panel on technology and traceability. We have a large group of panelists here, all very well-respected experts in their field. And I will do a quick introduction, given we've got a big group of everyone, so that everyone in the room knows who we are speaking with. So I'll start with Andrew Rimmer, who's the CEO of Opsydia, a pioneer in advanced laser-based security and traceability solutions with over 25 years in technology. We have Wes Tucker, CEO of Tracr, the world's leading platform for tracing natural diamonds. We have Jennifer Moriconi, Chief Sales Officer at iTraceiT, who brings a wealth of experience in blockchain-powered traceability. We have Leanne Kemp, founder and CEO of Everledger, which is a global leader in blockchain technology, and she's been voted top 50 women in tech, an IBM champion. We have Bruno Scarselli, founder of Authentia, which merges 3 generations of expertise in rare diamonds with cutting-edge blockchain technology. We've got Nicholas Molkte, who I've personally known for 2 decades, founder of Botswanamark, which focuses on creating a fully traceable diamond supply chain rooted in Botswana. And we have Tai Wong, Director of Innovation and Product Development at PGI, and he leads global innovation in the platinum jewellery industry. So let's give them a very warm welcome. Thank you all. Let me just start off by setting the scene. What we're trying to do here is talk really openly in a room of friends on the opportunities and the challenges that are faced by the industry when we talk traceability. We know that traceability is becoming an increasingly critical component for the jewellery industry as consumers demand greater transparency and assurance on ethical sourcing. We know that. The trend is there. But while technology actually offers us significant opportunities for traceability, adoption remains limited. Why? Well, there might be many barriers. So it could be cost, it could be complexity, it could also be real technical expertise within our trade. And I want to start by focusing on on these challenges. So I'm going to start with Jennifer. What do you see as the actual main barriers to entry, and why do you believe that the industry's been slow in adoption when it comes to using technology for traceability?
So my belief that the main barriers, comes from some fears and some false beliefs sometimes. They come from our side, on the technology side, a lack of some integrations and collaborations, and then some lack of training and understanding of how to use these tools. But to dig a bit deeper into the fears and beliefs, I think the industry believes there are a lot of changes in their practices. They may be not wrong, at least when we take it to the traceability of ESG elements, the regulations. They're here to stay, so we can't go around them. And the objective of these regulations is to change practices. But maybe traceability is there to help that, to help understand the value chains, how to manage the data. And if you manage the data, you can also manage your business and do strategies about it. And I think this could help. If these barriers were overcome, it would help. I think also traceability is being seen as transparency. It is to some extent. I'll be short and then I'll cut off. Okay. I think it actually protects your business practices, but it makes you accountable for what you do at some stage. But between clients and providers, you can actually keep some more protection and privacy than you used to. I think it's believed that it's complicated and expensive, but it depends how you use it. And I think a lot believe they don't comply to it, whereas traceability does not judge, it just establishes what's happening. And then from there on, you can do better. But you don't have to be up at a certain level to be able to comply with traceability. Traceability just makes a picture, and it doesn't judge, it doesn't police somehow. And this misunderstanding gives a fear to the industry to use it and to start applying it on their daily basis. There is a belief also that there's a lot of work. Maybe there I can't take it off. And then something that we discussed yesterday, that traceability cannot start at any place. Though we had the discussion, and I believe it can, and that it helps the circularity of grandfathered goods, for example. So it actually scoops everybody in, and we have eternal materials. And these materials don't perish, and if they don't perish, they have to start some point. And in 100 years, if we started today, we can have a story of a piece that has a long journey. So we can use it for marketing. It can become an added value and not just a regulation, not just a burden to practices. So last but not least, it helps you and it doesn't impede you to increase your resilience and to be more ready for next steps and how to manage your value chains to respond to regulation that will change in the future as well. And I think on our side, the big barrier is that we're not integrated. We don't have the same minimal data points, which would help the industry not to take time. You asked why it took time. A lot of clients or prospects say, we don't know who to choose, how to choose. And so if there was some coherence, we would maybe make it a faster adoption. And I think that's about it, for my opinion, at least.
I think that's really interesting, because your lens is one of a service provider. I'm here to offer you a tool to trace, right? And so you're seeing either a welcoming audience or someone that's saying cost, confusion, are you testing my compliance, etc., curiosity. So I'm going to be checking, by the way, with everyone in the audience if their assumptions on the resistance is actually true from your perspective during the Q&A section. So keep that in mind, please, guys. And then here we have Platinum Guild International. I want to understand from your perspective, and your experience, what is the actual challenge that you feel is creating this barrier?
Okay, thank you, Feriel. At PGI, we are looking at the possibility of a fully traceable jewelry. So from stone to metal to ethical and responsible production. So And I like to approach that sort of the barrier from two perspectives, one from a technical aspect, the other one from a market consideration. So for the first one, for technical, for metal, it's always been a little bit complex when we're tracing the origin of metal because, yes, on one hand, we have platinum directly coming from the mines. And for example, South African mining goes through the strictest and most formal of sourcing protocols, and is regulated by organizations and authorities like South Africa Diamond and Precious Metal Regulators, licensing all platinum activities, including mining and processing. So in a sense, all the paperwork is already there, the paper trail is there. But not all, or if anything, most of the platinum being used in jewelry production is not fresh from the mines. A lot of it is recycled from the auto industry or from fiberglass and from other places. And there's all levels of complexity when we're tracing into the origin of these recycled metals. From the platinum side of the business, we haven't really settled on the technology to track metal. And I'd love to engage with today's panelists to see what sort of options we have in doing that. So that's the technical aspect. The other one is from the market consideration, because at PGI we do tons of research. And while research is showing that there is a consumer need with sustainability, with traceability, and to a large extent, consumers are willing to pay extra for it. When we do work with the retailers, they do come back saying that it's a little bit far from the reality. They are still having difficulty in converting traceability into commercial value. So for example, last year we've launched a responsibly mined platinum into the market, and that's platinum sourced straight from South Africa and is sourced in compliance with LPPM, with the responsibly mined platinum guidelines. And we launched that with Stoller in the USA last year, and it actually has moved some significant volume. But we are yet to see a vast adoption of that positioning, the responsibly mined, and how that goes from a certificate to an actual retail communication with consumers. We're still in the works with a lot of retailers to do that. And some of the feedbacks we get is it's hard to price traceability into the jewelry pricing. And when we're talking about vast adoption, we're looking at mass market jewelry retail. And they're saying a lot of consumers are not directly coming into the store asking for traceability, nor do they have, right now, the sales data to prove that they're willing to pay a premium. Now, while, I guess, building the infrastructure, building the communication, building the interface, it's not costly, I think what they're struggling and what they're exploring is how do they really build a perfect narrative for the consumer to really identify with, like a very substantial value. One of them came back with the idea, for example, for color stones, when you can trace the origin, and there's meaning of these origins, you know, if a color stone coming from Africa or coming from South America, is there actual attribute differences that they can tell the consumers so they know exactly what they're getting, and there's a point of differentiation and authentic data. So I think all that effort, aside from just trying to build profit, I think the mentality is really for brands to build something authentic and something substantial and something relevant so that they're offering a very unique brand experience for the customers. And that's what we hear at PGI.
Yes, I mean, I also see that perspective. It's quite complex and you can't really simplify it. You need to think it through. Is a product from South Africa better than a product from another country? Like, what are you saying when you're saying it's traced to this country? And a lot of thinking is still required to do that. And you spoke about, you know, the certificate at retail, and we have with us here Pritesh, who is representing the GIA as Chief Operating Officer. Arguably, the GIA is the leading, the most trusted consumer-facing certificate for gems out there. And I'd love to hear your perspective. We've spoken about the challenges, so let's talk about the opposite, you know, the opportunity. We have such a huge panel, then there must mean that there is demand out there for traceability, for provenance storytelling. What problems are we trying to solve? Where are we all united in working towards the opportunity that we're trying to solve for the trade? Pritesh, please go ahead. Sorry, the mic isn't working.
Try this one. Okay, let's try that. There we
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you. So I think the great opportunities are, when we talk about that, it always starts with consumers, right? I think, Ty, you talked about it. In our earlier presentation, Maher talked about it a lot, about consumer. And everything we're doing, it is ultimately goes down to enhancing the consumer trust in that when they're buying these beautiful products. While we have heard about that consumers are not walking in the stores asking for it, but latest data recently we have seen it, that trend is changing. We have seen that trend happening in many other products, luxury products, normal day-to-day household products and stuff. So I think that trend is changing, and it is an expectation of consumers to go in and specifically ask that where the products are comes from, right? And so for us, when we look at those opportunities, how do we bring those stories, an average billion-year-old diamond, right? So how do you bring that story of traceability, the origin that comes into it is a great opportunity. Technology plays a huge role in providing that opportunity to for us to take those stories out in there. And that's what our role as a GIA has been, to bringing those factual information about the products into through our grading report and services we provide. One of the opportunities is that use the existing practices and existing vehicles to get that messaging to the consumers in there. And that's one other area is our grading reports that goes to the millions of consumers. And so when we are trying to look for it is how do we bring the factual information either based on science or is it based on technological verification ways to do it. Our supply chain is complex, and those complexities requires a creative solutions for us to bring it in there. Not only complex supply chain, but also it's a wide variety of it. For example, when you have a De Beers who has a very well-established practices and way to collect information through the processes and things into that, or Sierra Leone example that was in there, where it's artisanal mining, or the manufacturers in India who are very small. How do you build that bridge? And technology plays a big role in doing so. So when we look at those opportunities, we all have different solutions to bring to bear here. Is how do we make it interoperability? That's an opportunity of it, so that when we get the best information that collected that we can provide to the consumer is a great way for us to do it in that part. And those things comes with creating and establishing a standards of information that we all talk on a same way on a regular basis. So it's creating a simplicity at the consumer level, and there's a less of the confusion in there. So while we are knee deep into the industry, we all understand all the things in there, but when it goes to consumer, it has to be simplified, and the best and simplified way to get it into that part. So leveraging technology is great, but ultimately we have to keep it in mind. Our goal is to go to that consumer. And so for that, when we look at a GI, and we've been doing this for decades and decades in Colorstone, for example, talking about origin and things and providing based on a science. We know in diamond that science is not there for us to talk about origin or traceability. So let's use the technology, and our goal is to collaborate with many of you here to bring that information in there. And an example in Tracr, we've been working with them to bring Provenance, where some of those origin information on our grading report, or we have worked with Everledger in past in different programs that we are doing with it, is to take those information and bring it up to the consumers with that. So when I go back to the opportunities, it all starts with consumer, creating consumer trust, interoperability of the information that will help us enhance those trust, and it all starts with creating those standards that we all speak single nomenclature, so that there's an easier way for us to articulate those information wherever it's been communicated as part of it. So those are all the opportunities in front of us, and there is no one solution that's going to solve all the problem. And I think that requires a lot of collaboration, that requires a lot of communication and coming together in there. And so this is a great way of starting some of these conversations and the work that we all are working together.
That's, you know, when I think about GIA, I think trust, right? So consumers ask for that certificate because it provides them with trust between two parties for an interaction. And it's lovely to hear that the GIA is thinking, right, what's the next stage of that trust? Because even though, as you mentioned, maybe consumers are not asking for it now, maybe they're expecting it, right? So given that you mentioned Tracer, let's move to you, Wes. Are you working to solve the same problem? Do you agree with what Pritesh has said, or would you like to?
No, I mean, absolutely. I think, Pritesh, you've summed it up quite well. And what I want to touch on at the end, and I'll sort of come back to the question, is a thank you for this. And to the audience, this has never happened. And if there is a question that this panel can't answer, there is no answer to that question. So please think about your questions, because now is a good time for it. And I think, you know, I see that the world that we live in the jewelry industry and diamonds, et cetera, is a risk and opportunity balancing themselves out all the time. And I think you touched on that quite well. The things we hear all the time, which I think has already been reflected in the panel, are these three key things, which is, you know, the one, and I'll talk a little bit about that opportunity, is, well, no one's asking for it. You know, the second is that, what about my existing stock? And I think you touched a little bit on the grandfathering. I've got one that has origin, one that doesn't, et cetera. And then the other one is this added cost in the industry. And so for me, you know, the first two in terms of cost and scale, you know, the companies that are sitting here, 5, 6, 7 years of doing this, we probably cover over half of the diamond industry in terms of traceability. So I think availability is not a problem. We work very hard on simplifying the process, using existing channels, using existing technology to not add additional cost. But the one opportunity and risk that I think is very interesting is in that downstream space, which says, a lot of them say, well, look, the consumers aren't asking for me, so come back when the consumer is asking. And I think there's a huge opportunity there, as well as a balancing risk. And my view is there's two types of companies in the jewelry industry. There are brands, and there are those companies that sell products to customers. They're two distinctly different things. So if you're a company that's selling a product to a customer, then by all means, whatever the customer wants on that day, you fulfill that and you move on. It's no problem. And you'll be okay. You'll find whatever it is that needs to be sold and you'll sell it into that channel. If you're building a brand and you want to build something that is going to last generationally, something that is trusted, then if you wait until the consumer is asking and you cannot answer that question, you're going to put your brand at risk. And so, but you asked me about opportunity, not about risk. So that is a clear risk, but I see it at the same time as opportunity. And we spoke a little bit about the existing channels. We spoke about how we can communicate to markets. And I think Mahir did a really good job of talking about, you know, the opportunity of the data collected along the value chain that can tell rich, meaningful stories. And I think the main opportunity, using whichever platform you choose to use to collect whatever data you choose to use, or whatever standard and level you want to do, because that's up to you, because it's your brand. It's your family name on that door. You choose your path. I don't think it really matters which one you do. But how do you create rich, meaningful collections that speak to your brand using that data that you've never had before? And the work this panel has done to create a new frontier for diamond jewelry in the market, where I think it's needed now to create something new that's going to attract the attention and allow that new generation coming through to fall in love, is going to be collections based on origin, collections based on where it was manufactured, who manufactured it. There's going to be something that is rich and meaningful, that if you adopt technology, you'll be able to scale that out in the industry, and you'll be able to tell something that, to be fair, is going to differentiate your brand in a way that is then trusted in the downstream market.
You know, I think it's really interesting that the word compliance has not been used yet here. You know, you need to do this to comply, which is great, because they're thinking bigger than that. They're thinking consumer, the consumer of the future. And they're thinking expectations. How do I prove that my brand holds these values that consumers want to wear with pride, right? So I love that hasn't been mentioned yet, and I'll park that for a second. The second point that I wanted to say, that was really interesting from what you've said, is there's many of us. It doesn't matter which one you choose, right? We're all here to serve the same purpose. But frankly, it's confusing, right? I'm looking at all the service providers. There's many, right? So, Leanne, I want to come to you first, right? And I want to say, how can all the technology providers work in collaboration with industry stakeholders to simplify the implementation, to help them make the right choice for their business, to overcome all of the challenges and or use the opportunities that we've discussed?
Hello. Oh, good. So I've been in traceability for 25 years. I know nothing else, and I know nothing more other than technology, which is ones and zeros. We have many platforms, many solution providers. 10 years ago, there wasn't this many at the table when I first began, and there's many today. And we have an incredible set of toolbooks and, RJC and many acronyms, people busy. But we do not collaborate at a level that is so critically important to get this right, which is an interoperable protocol. A constructed language that is the building block that enables you as industry to choose whatever light switch you want to turn on or off, or a dimmer switch for your story, or the type of lighting that you want to put in the room to amplify your collection. And until that happens, there will be many, many solutions, but it will not be robust, and traceability will not provide the right amount of outcome that this industry deserves to not only give its consumers, but to give itself. In technology, we see many constructive waves of trends. I've built many platforms. One of them at some point in time 10 years ago was about building API first, right? So when you're thinking about building technology, you think about API first. Now it's about AI first. If we stopped today talking about traceability as a sidecar for industry, like a freak show or a circus, that maybe will help deliver origin as a part of a storytelling, and bought it as the constructive core, as important as a USB plug is to be able to charge something or make a connector, then that is the only way we will enable traceability to deliver value. We've heard in ESG talks now, the freight train is coming around the collection of data. Hello, that's traceability. It's not just about origin. So companies on this panel have many platforms. We all have different solutions. But what is still missing at its very core is all of us to take our corporate jackets off, sit in a room in a pre-competitive space, have a willingness to collaborate and create an interoperable protocol, and enable it as an international standard. Our industry rejected the ability to have an international standard around traceability. Total, utter insanity. We need more nerds in the room. We have enough technical talent. We're never invited in. Probably won't get invited back next time, but that's okay. That's all I got to say.
You'll always be invited. You'll always be invited. And it's true. Leanne was the first person that came to talk about blockchain technology for traceability to the industry. And what's interesting is, from your perspective, collaboration is extremely important, but somehow you're feeling that the industry doesn't want collaboration. But what we're hearing is industry saying, gosh, there's too many of you. Why can't you just collaborate and make it one? So there's clearly some sort of disconnect on perception versus reality there. So Bruno, let's go with you now. So which is, do you agree that that's the best way to go? Or is there something else that you think we can do as different service providers to overcome these challenges that are perceived from the trade?
Well, interestingly enough, you hear so many different views and motions and
Sorry, Bruno, I don't think we can hear you.
feelings.
Yeah.
Like to sing. So there are certainly many aspects here that touch either a right side or the left side of the problem. And what is the problem? I don't view it as a problem. The industry is archaic. We are one of the oldest, correct? We have dinosaurs walking around 47th Street. We're a very old industry. It's something that before we can come together, we need to create programs. And those programs can only be generated by giving solutions. Blockchain is a very complex technology. It's not something that You can allow yourself, you go and buy a computer, you put it on your desktop, open it, and create a file system. Blockchain technology is such that if the stakeholders don't come together in creating friendly, user-friendly solutions that are modular, what does that mean? It means that they fit and create a solution for the type of business that you have. Often the problem that we have is that the technology is so broad, but no one really knows how to recognize what it can do for your business. So with respect to that, one of the things is that I heard here on the panel is creating a standard. For us at Authentia, we created a standard for Authentia. We have 26 different patents that are filed all over the world, and we actually follow a very rigid standard. But that's for us, you know, that's really not for everyone. And we felt that after generations of spending, buying and selling rough and polished diamonds and manufacturing, we felt that we knew, at least for us, where the dark and difficult point that no one is really addressing in our industry. And we went ahead and put it into patents. But coming back to us, what we need is we need to make this technology easy for everyone to understand. We need to have a principle of interoperability, as we have heard, which really refer to making the solution simple, very specific for the business that you are conducting. The other aspects that I would suggest can bring us together is instituting programs that teach retailers what is it that they are actually adventuring towards. We have heard origin is not important or origin is important. Well, to some people it's not, and to some other it is. If you're a retailer that buy the rough and produce it and create your jewelry and you sell it to your consumer, Authentia, for example, will have an authentication program that allows you to know exactly where everything is coming from. Aside from Authentia, there are many other solutions that are compatible and plausible for that particular program. The reality is that we need to come together. We have heard that before. Leanne was very vocal about it. There are many aspects that are unknown. You know, for example, you're right, today data is money. Today data is knowledge. Today data is power. We know that because the culture of Amazon with their cloud systems empower huge economies of businesses around the world. And so for that particular reason, the question that remains to be answered is, once you share your data on a blockchain, who owns the data? So those are aspects we should sit down and analyze and find and provide ourselves an answer. Outside from that, I think that I would be repeating just about everything that has been said, so I think I will just be quiet and hand the baton to someone else.
Thanks, Bruno. I think that is a genuine concern. It's a concern that needs to be, I hear it all the time. Who is owning this data? Data is money. This is my data. Which, you know, do you take my data when I give you this information? And it's very hard to understand the answers. So there's a technical conversation that needs to be simplified on both sides, because the trade has technical speak and lots of letters, and the technology providers have ones and zeros that we can't ever understand. So I think there is a communication gap on that front.
Just one last thing, and it may not pertain to the last statement that you said, that you made, but one of the things that, for example, we should be able to provide our customers, especially retail customers, is what is that authentication program going to look like for their business? that means is maybe it's not something to make available to the broader mass that comes in and buys one specific type of jewelry. Maybe it is for those more discerning clients that may want to actually learn the heritage of their product. As we have heard, the origin, what it means in relationship to the communities that live in those areas, as we have heard from the beers.
Yeah, well, agree. Thank you, Bruno, for that. So let's move into what's been happening recently. Compliance has been a big topic, right? When we talk about origin in the trade, it's because regulation is coming that needs to prove that our product can be moving across international borders if it doesn't come from a sanctioned entity, a sanctioned country, etc. And that's why origin has become important. It's more of a B2B burning platform right now to be able to do trade. But beyond compliance, historically, when we think of provenance and we think of origin, we think quality, like Persian rugs, like Iranian caviar, like, Cuban cigars. This is different now, or is it the same? So I want to move into the consumer-facing side and say, beyond compliance, how can traceability and provenance add value from your perspective? And let me start with you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot have been said already, so I'm trying to, figure out exactly what can add value at this stage. Listen, I think obviously technology and blockchain is not a very sexy topic. And when you are putting that in front of a consumer, generally in a retail environment where you're trying to sell jewelry and diamonds, they're saying, and you start talking about blockchain, they're like, well, I don't want to buy Bitcoin, right? What is this blockchain? There's a lot of education that has to happen on that side. And luckily we're in a position now where actually, like we heard already from Maya and other people, that consumers are asking those questions. They are coming in saying, actually, I would like to know where my diamond come from, or do you know where this diamond come from that I would like to purchase? And so very much I see the next stage is really around developing those tools, developing those tools that allow retailers and brands to make it wrapped in a really beautiful way that really tells that story and make it luxury. And so it's not just looking at, zeros and ones on a screen. We need to wrap it up in a way that consumers feel that they're buying something, obviously, to enhance the trust in the product and in the industry, which I think for a very long time, I think there's trust when it comes to brands. I think as an industry as such, there's a lack of trust. The blockchain and all the work that is being done by everybody on this panel has that ability to transform our industry and regain trust for consumers, and give jewelers and brands the tools to really maintain what I call the diamond dream. And I mean, obviously De Beers have been talking about the diamond dream for decades, but I think we have to realize that the consumer today is just very different. They have very different expectations, and like we've just seen, I mean, literally the world is on fire. And the sensitivity to knowing where your product comes from, what the environmental impact is of that specific product, becomes just increasingly important as we progress. And we will see that people become more and more sensitive. And I think if we don't, as an industry, allow people to have those tools so they can answer those questions around, where it comes from and specifically what is, and that's, I think, the next step, which perhaps we haven't touched some on, but I know there was a panel this morning that spoke about the ESG. What is the ESG impact of buying this diamond versus another diamond from a different country? So I think there's huge opportunity, and that's, what I'm kind of focused on. I have been focusing on trying to develop those tools that give people the ability to tell that story.
The ability to tell that story, and you're right. I mean, whether they choose to use it for the sales process or not is up to them, right? And I think that's absolutely key.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the end, you can have the tools and you can decide how much or how little you would want to speak to that consumer about it. The important thing is that you have it. And so I think you said earlier, if you're asked, I think it was you, you were saying, you know, if you get asked, it's better to have it, right? Because if you don't have it, then the consumer's going to go, okay, well, clearly you don't know where this product comes from and what the environmental impact is. And so that's essential. And then brands can decide, depending on where they sit, like, you know, as you were referring to, are they selling product or are they selling a brand, how much and how little they would like to integrate that into their brand, their storytelling, their communication, but it's there.
Yeah, so I can see absolutely the need to have it just in case, you know, just in case you're being asked questions for the brand. And from a De Beers perspective, we do a lot to tell the natural diamond story, but we are in the rough, right? From Opsydia's perspective, I love the laser tech that you've worked on from the polish, so well done. I think it's really, really exciting. So, and you started doing that work way before people were asking about compliance issues and things like that. So I really want to hear your view, Andrew, as to why. What do you see the opportunity as beyond compliance? Why do you think, you know, on the polish side, we should be using this tech?
No, thank you, Feriel, and obviously great to be here. I think, first of all, just to say, you know, it's been really encouraging that compliance has been the word that really has been left.
Yeah.
And the priority across a lot of the discussion here is around the consumer. And so ultimately, I think, you know, down to the practicalities, if we're talking about the use of tech, what it can actually do, it has got to be the thing that actually helps us tell the story to the consumer. By being able to tell that story to the consumer, we're creating the trust, and that ripples right the way through, as long as you've got the right compliance underneath, to then elevating the sort of brand. And I mean, back to the consumers, we've also got to recognise that consumers today have probably got the most information, the access to the most information they've ever had, and they also go searching for the most information. And so when we look at the technology side, you know, that's our challenge, is how do we actually meet that? Because the other thing that comes with that is the two types of information. You know, the correct information, and then there's the false information as well. So when we're looking at the technology platforms and we're looking at the way that, you know, we're actually interacting with them, then, you know, we've got a battle on our hands, you know, to make sure that it's actually the true information which the consumers are actually focusing on, because that, again, is the thing that then is going to, you know, help a brand and support the brand security. So really, the traceability technology, it's got to be sort of underpinned by there's real data points there, and be able to show that in a way that's very easy for the consumer to understand. So I will just use our laser tech as an example, forgive me for that. So essentially, we've got a technology that means that you can write a nanoscale inscription inside the diamond. And it can be a logo, a serial number, it can be both. It doesn't affect the grade, Pritesh, so be reassured of that.
Can you confirm?
And then, but the point is, you know, we've got the various sort of traceability platforms, but the key thing is being able to say, yes, that really is this piece of jewellery I'm talking about. And so that's where this sort of comes in. So if you can put that piece of jewellery, you know, we're going to be able to put that into a viewer so that someone can actually see that logo or that serial number, and then open up all the traceability platform and the story that goes with it. So what you've done there is you've really established that sort of trust for the consumer right at that stage. And it goes beyond, you know, the first sale, if you like, as well. You know, if that information and that sort of trust, if you like, then goes into, say, a digital product passport, we need to have this way of bringing all the different pieces of information together so that it goes with the piece, whether it's a new one or it's creating enduring value, you know, for the secondary market as well. You know, if we look at the major brands, really important part for their brand value is not just the new pieces, but it's also the pieces that people bought 20 years ago and 50 years ago and even longer than that. So the platforms need to be able to support that sort of journey right the way through and make sure it's there for the future for the brands as well. I will just touch again on you know, the sort of compliance as well, and throw in an extra thing, and that is, you know, G7 excludes melee. But maybe in our technology solutions, let's bring melee in as well. You know, because, I mean, if you're a jeweler, you're a watchmaker, then probably one of the biggest areas of risk is actually melee. So let's have a solution that actually brings that into the fold as well. So I think, again, really just focusing on the consumer. I think where we have succeeded, and our test, if you like, is if you show this information to a consumer, maybe in the retail store, the test is, can they repeat the story that they've learnt when they get home to their friends or their family? And if they can, the brand has won and the technology has supported that.
You know, that's very true. I think we're too complicated for the consumer when we're talking traceability, provenance, etc. And even when we're talking to each other, my dad always would say to me, when you're sick of saying it, that's the first time they've heard it, because apparently I speak too technical. But I'm the least technical in this panel. So is there any response to that on the melee side? Does anyone want to add to that?
Not to add directly on the melee. It's true, we work on melee, but the nano engraving can be done, but it's a cost question. It's not a technical question that it can't be done. It's a cost. Now, there are other authenticators. We did not talk about the difference between certification, authentication, digital product passport, digital twins, and all that. It is important, but here we were talking about the traceability, which is the train, and then the connectors with metals are different. Cocoa is different, all different products. I wanted to go back to the cost. I think it can be expensive not to use traceability. Why? I take an example, and I don't want to put a stigmat on anybody. Avi Kravitz was talking about why Signet went down 22%, saying that they should have shopkeepers that were more experienced. If I understood right, maybe I understood not right, but that's what I understood. I do think that jewelry shops need to have, of course, good shopkeepers, but it's not always easy to recruit people who know the story of each piece. And this is where traceability, you can have a staff that rotates and just needs to scan whatever, if it's a QR code, a barcode, whatever code is the identifier that includes the story. But so the shopkeeper can then tell the story about the jewelry piece easily, and the consumer can even tell it further on. But for that, I think the whole industry, from the mining, from the recycling of gold, from the grandfather goods, from all, need to understand that the data that they include, the images, the videos, the different type of information is what's going to feed the end seller with all the arguments to differentiate. We see here how many jewelers are there, how many pieces are there. Everybody needs to differentiate one way or another. So there's a fight for that. And this is where traceability, you have the whole story. Your importance is gender balance. So you find the value chain and you find the elements that will justify that your jewelry talks to women that buy for themselves. Or you choose a manufacturing plant that works with handicapped people in Namibia, and your jewelry pieces are made for people who have difficulties to open up the pieces, whatever. I don't want to give 10 examples, but you can add value, differentiate in a highly competitive market through traceability. And this is really the message I want to bring. It's not only cost, it's not only regulation. Use it as a tool, because it's not there to go away. The regulations are not going to go away. So we might as well get the resilience and adapt to it. That was just it.
Resilience is key here, Nick.
No, I was just thinking, it's interesting when you sit and reflect what other people are saying. And from my own experience, there's huge challenges in terms of implementation and cost and all these things. But certainly at the very forefront, staff training and at the end, the sales teams and people who are standing in front of the customers and are selling that final product. There's a huge amount of training that needs to be done, and I see that myself with the clients that I have. That for us to move to this what I call Diamond Dream 2.0. I mean, the amount of time and effort that everybody has to put in collectively to bring those front staff salespeople up to a level that they have that knowledge, let alone understand what is blockchain, how are diamonds traced, where do they come from, what are the ESG impacts, and so on and so on. We can develop all these tools that are there, but unless they're really fully understood and they're able to be used in a convincing way to sell that natural diamond at the end, we don't have anything. That's just the point I want to make.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel so sorry for the frontline staff when my family does mystery shopping. Me, my husband, my daughter, it's such a nightmare for the poor person that's answering our questions, because we use every single opportunity to tell them what they should be saying instead. But it's a huge task, not only because of a recruitment issue, but because of a retention issue as well. So having that data there to be able to address the recruitment and retention issue is a very different way to look at things. But first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for sticking to time, and I really wanted this to be super engaging. So I promised that I was going to go back to the audience and start asking questions from the audience. You've heard from the specialists what they think the problems of the trades are when they are looking at traceability and engagement, the challenges. Do you first agree with what they have said? Are those the true challenges that you feel before adopting or welcoming a technology traceability solution? Or do you want to correct some of the perceptions that have been presented today? Anyone?
Yeah, we don't bite. We don't bite, guys. You can ask.
Let me just remind you what they said. Oh yes, we've got a brave person in the back. Please stand up, introduce yourself, and let us know if you're aligned.
Thank you very much. Full disclosure, I'm a biologist, so I work with the companies in the sector trying to identify impacts at the site where the commodities come from. So for us, traceability is essential. I can't do my job if there's no traceability. But as Jennifer mentioned, sorry, quite often companies fear traceability because they suppose it's a reputational reputational risk that's coming to them, right? Because what if it's sourced from there and people there, whatever, something happens and people will not want to buy because it's there. And I think this then combines what a couple of you said, is that this is actually opportunity because recently in one sustainable cosmetics conference, one of the people said, why do we need this sustainable label on a product? All of our products by default should be sustainable. If we have traceability, we can make sure that there is no impact on the ground, which is gonna say, oh, I don't wanna source rubies from here or sapphires from there, because that's gonna ensure that the company mining, the company polishing, the company selling made sure there are no negative impacts where the stuff happens. That cleans your supply chain. What stays is then what you, Jennifer, mentioned is, what are you doing as a positive action on the ground? Are these women miners? Is this agri-connected mining process? Is this giving education to local communities to polish? This is where you gain. But I think really one of the issues that I see so often with clients is that they fear traceability, when traceability should actually be an opportunity to clean up and show up for your clients, for the communities that you source for. What we heard before from the beers, all the actions that they're taking on some of the countries where they mine, this is where traceability brings value. So I really, I would like to hear what some of you, because some of you are also in companies, what you feel, because I've really struggled to find companies which are not terrified of traceability, even to a point where I am starting to suspect that there is much more traceability in industry than it's put on the table. Because I literally had clients who say, we can tell you where this is coming from, but you cannot use it. You cannot use the global data sets to estimate the impact, because maybe that way someone can trace it back to where we are tracing it. So, or we give a report after a year and a half of guessing and modeling where sourcing could be happening, and then the sourcing specialist says, oh, we don't source from there, we source from here. So industry does know it to some level, and some of you will know it way better than me. But there is this fear of, like, if we say where we're tracing from, then that's a risk for us. So that much from me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pritesh.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And one of the things, as we kind of think about is, and some of the thing has been discussed here, when consumer looks for a product and they're looking for the trust that who are they buying from and what story is being told, what emotionally, how they get connected with those products that doing it. So a lot of times the brands or the individual retailers who is selling the product, it's a reputation of that consumer is buying the product based on that part, right? And so how does that reputation builds on it? And it starts with the foundation of information and transparency that comes with it, or the story that they're telling about. And I think one of the challenges, and you mentioned in there, is there's a lot of this data and information is available in the industry. A lot of people know some of the things are in there. So the question for us is, how do we ensure that transparency flows through an entire supply chain, a complex supply chain that goes through it, and every product that goes in, people can stand behind in that part. So I think Leanne mentioned as well, I think we as an industry is going to have to focus on creating that transparency at the level that it is like a USB plug in on the wall or things that comes into it. It has to be taken at a way that it's there. And then all of the brand or marketing or stories to the consumer, the reputation gets built upon those facts and truths that stands behind it. So the organization or company who wants to tell the story of a miner in Sierra Leone versus somebody who wants to tell a different story, they can build upon that based on that part. So it gives each individual brands their own storytelling ability, but it has based on that transparency that we can build it on. And I think that's the challenge that we have, is how do you get to that point where transparency is given? It's not what we have to ask for it in there. And so great opportunity for all of us to collaborate on that as an industry to bring it into that part. But ultimately, that's the answer, is to make it in a very transparent and everything that comes through it, and leverage of the technology, not in a single place get its hold on.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree, and I want to touch a little bit on what Leanne said as well. But maybe from your question, given you come from the sort of the biological background, looking back into the mine sites and the impact, etc. I'm not a diamond guy, which I don't like to admit to everybody in a room full of retail jewelry branded people. But I'm a miner, so I come from a mining background. I worked in Africa and Australia, and I have a passion for what you guys do that allows wealth to flow back to communities in source countries. And the phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats, is the one I like to think about when we think about traceability. So the one thing I will say is we seem to be talking a lot about a lack of adoption of traceability. I can tell you there's a lot of adoption of traceability all the way through the value chain. There's a few of our customers in the room, manufacturers, they have their own traceability solutions. There are technology providers that are working with people, et cetera, et cetera. There's absolutely no shortage of traceability. I think a lot of people are using it in the background, and they don't want to surface it to a certain degree. And for us, what we focus heavily on is bringing on as many of those source countries as possible. And to be fair, not to discriminate, but allow them to tell their story and allow their story to improve. And I think about Angola a lot. So Angola is probably the most prospective diamond mining country in the world. We speak to a lot of brands that are interested in finding ways that they can purchase Angolan diamonds. That's an interesting transition from where they were before. And I think that's a huge opportunity for us to be able to do that. But it touches a little bit on what Leanne says, and I want to say I completely agree with what she said. We talk about collaboration. We spend a lot of time working hard on collaboration. I spend more time speaking to lawyers before I get to collaborate, which touches a little bit on the challenge. But you cannot collaborate in the technology space without a standardized way of communicating. And when not talking to lawyers, we're talking to the technical teams to translate data in the diamond industry. You would think that an industry that has something like the 4 Cs has a standard way of talking about data, but they do not. Every lab is a little bit different, and every manufacturer is a little bit different. And so we're trying to create this transition layer. And I think absolutely open to finding that standard with all the red lines that exist and all these things that exist in a non-perfect world. But there is an industry challenge there in that if you think about, and sorry, most important thing, please don't walk away from this talk and think that we're talking about blockchain, because that's not what we're talking about. A kid in their basement can spin up a blockchain on AWS tomorrow. It doesn't add a huge amount of value in terms of the time and effort that's put into it. But the reason we all gravitate, I think, and there are more people on this panel are better experts than me, towards blockchain is it was supposed to be this thing that creates multi-party trust. because it's an open, transparent way of communicating data. The diamond industry is terrified of an open layer of diamond transaction, and I totally understand why, because they see it as a commercial information. And so we have to find this way of creating that standardized way of sharing data, but in a permission, secure, blind way. But to be honest, leave that to us. Help us, but leave that to us. What the industry needs to do is to say, for this industry to continue to survive in a complex geographical world, and if you haven't seen the signs that the world is going to get more complex and it's going to get more challenging, it is going to happen. You cannot hide from it. Find a way of coming together, because ironically, you're all buying from the same people. The stuff that you can't sell, you'll sell to someone else who will then sell along. It's the same industry all working together. And yes, you can compete at the tail end, and you must compete. But we share, and the tide must rise to help everybody along the way, or the whole industry collapses under the weight and the load of that. But just to say, and I do hope you're here next year. It's my first time, so maybe I'll come back if you come, Leanne. The creation of a standard for us to communicate as an industry and data is so important, because all we're trying to do at the moment is four-season origin. What happens when we're talking about carbon and water and all these other impact points, and we're all speaking a different language, it becomes incredibly difficult.
Bruno?
There we go. So I wanted to come back to some of the comments that were made here, simply because when we think about technology, we think about something that is complex, and it is. When we talk about sharing data, as we said before, this is the power of the industry. Well, there is an answer. The answer is not a private blockchain, but a public blockchain. And the severity of this conversation is maybe too deep for this moment. I see a lot of people here probably feeling quite hot. So I will not go deeper into the technology aspect of what I am looking to impart here, but simply say that the importance of being able to supply to your customer a security measure to allow your customer to enter a blockchain so that they can verify the data. That's the answer that here was being discussed when it comes down to full transparency. And that's everything.
I think the question that we're asking is, does it add value? And I'll tell you something. I've heard a lot of comments about how the trade feels, right? That's why I want the trade to say, yes, that's true, or no, that's not true. But I'll answer that from a trade perspective. If it makes money, we'll do it, right? So, and if it doesn't make money, we won't focus on it. It's very simple. It's the same thing with the sustainability. You can't just do it on the side to, tiny little project. You need to do good by doing well, so you can make money and reinvest that profit into something else to grow your business. So that's my challenge to everyone that's focusing on the solution, the problem that they're trying to solve, is prove that it will make money, and we'll all do it immediately. So I'll go back to the audience now and see, is there any agreement with what I've said? Anything anyone else wants to say? Any questions you have for the panel now that you've got them all here together? Silence. Raluca, please.
Raluca Angel, Natural Diamond Council. I wanted to say, and actually congratulate you, because it is a unique amount of people. I've taken the most fabulous photos, because you are truly impressive. You do bring different sides of technology, but more than that, you bring unity. At the Natural Diamond Council, we want to definitely...
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
That's very good.
At the Natural Diamond Council, of course, we talk to consumers all the time. And for me, it's very important to know that I'm able to share the message. And to be honest, I might come back to you to ask whether we could write an article together so that we can bring this to consumers. Because you are right, there is much more traceability that is being done by the industry than consumers actually believe. And industry, it's not just diamonds, it's Ty here is also to confirm that you're integrating all of these within the wider communication around jewelry. So I think this message of unity definitely needs to get to consumers. They need to feel very, very empowered to be able to trust this industry, because the industry does take care of them. They don't need to ask questions about traceability. They will have no clue. They'll get scared about it. But they want to know that the person that is in front of them, the jeweler, the retailer, can, one, address questions. And for me, I can definitely confirm from our side, talking to consumers, they want to be charmed by stories. So you made so many points, and I think we're all aligned in saying traceability can be absolutely used to tell a story, a beautiful story of the stones, of your products, of all of your collaborators. And it's a synergy that can certainly be brought to the sales assistant. So it's a confirmation, Feriel, that you are asking. I can tell you from the consumer side, definitely it's there. And this message of unity, please, let's tell it more so together, because I do think that will also drive further adoption.
Thank you so much, Raluca. So unity is the key. Unity is key here. Do you agree? Are you guys, I mean, we spoke about the need for collaboration, the need for a universal language for traceability, standard. Pritesh, please tell me.
Answer is yes.
Yeah.
But I will just go back to the question, or answer a question that you asked earlier about if it makes money, people will do it.
Yeah.
I think we should restate it a little bit differently. I think we should be thinking about if it creates value, people should bring it into that. Because if we create value, then money will come as a part of it. Because if we just look at traceability as just a way to bring more money, I don't think we are doing justice to the whole industry, or as things into that part. So I think how we should be thinking about, does it create a value for the industry, individual organization, or in the company? And if you do, then obviously financial rewards will come along with it in that part. So I just, because if we just look at it in terms of money, then it's going to be, well, it adds a lot of cost, or it adds a lot of these things in there. But to me, if that value is not generated at the end, where a supply chain ends in that part, none of these things kind of will work from that perspective. So, but I echo the confirmation about, yes, we need collaboration in industry, and collaboration will create value, and that will eventually generate a broader transparency and traceability into the supply chain.
Thanks, Pritesh. And that's a very good point. Very good point on value versus, I think the word that was used earlier is premium, because I guess that's where people don't see the premium in product that's traceable. Please.
No, and I think that's a super point. And I think that's something that has to be communicated really clearly, and especially now, obviously, with traceability coming in, you can actually demonstrate where, if there is additional cost, well, where is that happening along your pipeline? And like Mahia did the presentation before, in terms of demonstrating how much value all the additional cost goes back to certain communities, right? And why is there a premium or more value, or why is the stone or this product more expensive? Well, actually, because it's benefiting so and so further down the pipeline.
I'd like to add something with the fear that you said, but also mix it in with the different points, and that there are a lot of companies that use traceability, but maybe don't have a totally clean value chain. But let's think about it also for us. We would like to be more green, or at least for me, I would like to be more green, not take my car, not take the plane, do things like that. But between what I would like to be and what I know is the correct behavior for at least my kids and their kids to thrive in a world tomorrow, I can't do it properly. But when I can analyze where I have the most negative impact, I can reduce 1 point at a time. Like the IKEA that took one store out of their business, and that had a huge impact. So if you already can, if we could, that's difficult to not demonize bad behavior, but somehow if a company gets, let's say, ashamed, or how do you say, like gets a bad article about one thing they did in their value chain, they get exposed. If they have a clear view of what they do positive in all the rest, they can say, this was negative, we can work on it, and we can prove in 2 or 3 years that we actually resolved it, but we can also tell that we do all this. And this is where the scores in the end will be able to show that there are some products that, yes, have some black points on their value chain, should be resolved, but it cannot be resolved already if you can't detect it. That's the first thing. And you can actually use it as a tool to prove what you did good on the whole value chain. So that's maybe where it can also be used not as a premium or an additional cost, but at least to reduce the impact of a negative cost as well. I think it will come as a positive, and it is positive for those who really use traceability and can differentiate by using it now. It's positive, but in 2-3 years, everybody will have to use it somehow, I guess. And there will not be a differentiator as such, but there, well, that's it.
I think, I mean, you raised so many different points. So in the past, not so distant past, we would be very focused on stakeholders like NGOs. You know, we would be worried about exposés coming from NGOs. But today, really, they've lost a lot of their value because you've got any 14-year-old with a mobile phone showing something that can actually go viral, that shows the real situation on the ground, right? It needs to be short and sweet. And all these big articles, academic articles, don't land anymore. So an exposé can come from so many different sources, and that's a fear. And as a brand, if you put your name out there and say, hey, look how great I am, then you are a target. And what is great? So is great meaning perfect in everything, or do you focus on one topic and say, this is what I'm going to represent, and be authentic about the fact that the world is not perfect? Whereas a trade person might be fearing transparency of data, who owns the data. So it's not so clear-cut where the fear comes from and for what reason, right? So, and I think that complexity is has not been really, maybe it has, but in my world, it hasn't been really thought through and clearly defined to say, you as a stakeholder, I won't push you to tell the natural diamond story because of origin, because I understand that you're just worried about this thing, right? But I will speak to you about origin because it matters from a B2B perspective or a compliance perspective. And I'll speak to you about tech because that's the way that you're going to differentiate your brand versus everyone else for growth, whatever it is. And I think that is, that sort of customization of the engagement is going to be critical. And so talking about this 14-year-old with a mobile phone, we all have children and we have dinner with them every night, and they're very different creatures to us and to what we assume the next generation is going to be caring about. And I want to test with you. You know, do you think traceability is going to be important with your customer base? Do you currently actually get questions from your customers, or do you get questions from your family members when they talk to you about mining and its impact and, you know, saving the planet and turtles and so on? I mentioned turtles because my daughter said to me, when she figured out that diamond industry meant mining, she said, so do you kill turtles? And therefore you should buy me this bracelet here that protects, 3 bracelets protects apparently 10 turtles in the ocean. And so it's that simple. Does anyone have can you actually just raise your hand to say, yes, I agree, consumers are asking me right now about traceability? Okay, so not so bad. Do you believe, raise your hand, do you believe they will be asking you for traceability? A mic, please.
That's a very good point. I think it depends on the perception of the value of that question. So if we work on the perception, maybe they will ask more. I think it has to do with
so if you're saying if we start putting it out there, they'll ask more, right? Please, Lisa, hi.
Thank you. One of the things that I think is that you have an incredible opportunity to lead. And if traceability is important, then we affirm that importance. And in affirming that importance, and in explaining why, in explaining the value, if I may, Pritesh, then you have, in a way, because part of this is also how do you teach, if you will, and by that I don't mean subordinate to superior, but someone who knows a realm to a person where this may not have occurred to them, or they may not have thought of it in this way. And so consequently, I think the question, or a question that perhaps we should be asking ourselves is, how can we make this important? How can we make this relevant? And how can we show the value of this to the consumer and for the product? Thank you.
Great. We've got it. Thank you, Lisa. We've got a question in the back, and then we'll come back to the front.
Hello. Sorry. Hope everybody understands.
Go to the conclusion.
Hello, all my dearest peers here. I just wanted to say a comment that is when you ask if the end consumer is eventually asking for traceability, I think that if you ask the end consumer something that they don't know that it even exists, or that it's available, or which are their benefits, how are we supposed to understand that the end consumer will be asking, going on store, asking for something that they don't even know that it exists? This is first thing.
Very good point. Very good point.
Thank you. Second thing that I want to say is that I love this sentence from Henry Ford that said that he said, if someone has ever asked me what my consumers wanted, they would have said faster horses. And today we go with cars.
Very good point. I love that point.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So, very true. Very true. Great, strong points. What's your response?
No, and just to say that there's a fellow traceability brand product there, so go speak to her as well. She should be on the panel. But we only had 8 chairs, so she couldn't be on the panel. I think it's really interesting because I think sometimes we don't zoom out a little bit in our world, right? So, natural diamonds, gold, platinum, jewelry, brands, etc. And depending on the horizon that you're looking at, and I like the Henry Ford thing, right? Because it's a little bit like, Steve Jobs is like, I don't ask customers what they want, I give them what I think they need, and then it scales from there. If you zoom out a little bit and you look at the generational changes, so there's an entire generation that's going to be handing jewelry down to the next generation. We're not going to make any money from that. There's no value there, I'm afraid. So that's a problem, right? But also, if I, as a young consumer coming through, have finite resources and an infinite amount of choice as to what I can spend that money on, and I'm getting this pre-loved, grandfathered, second-hand jewelry coming down, what we have to be doing is competing for that attention span. This is a digital signaling world. I don't need to own something for people to think I have it. So I can borrow your ring and I can do a little Instagram post and I can give it back to you and people just assume I own it and I don't actually have to buy it. So to that point about, and again, this is not about traceability. This is about, in the 1940s, De Beers penned this line, the young female copywriter, diamond is forever, and we've lived on that dream for a long time. We need something new that is going to capture the consumers. And the two things, not to scare you, but the two things I'll leave you with is and you should do this for your business, I'm sure you all use ChatGPT and other things, so I'm interested in natural diamonds, so we focus on natural diamonds. And if you ask ChatGPT, should I buy a natural diamond or a lab-grown diamond? The answer is fascinating. It says to you that if you are interested in something that is rare and very expensive and valuable, you buy a natural diamond. Well, fair enough so far. If you're interested in something that is lower cost, lower price point, more accessible and ethical, you buy a lab-grown diamond. So if you're in the natural diamond world, that should scare you senseless. And if you want to make margin, that should scare you senseless. But that example can be used across a whole bunch of other things because it's the same thing. And so what we need to do as an industry is when that new consumer goes on the high street or in wherever it is, how do we convince them not to go into the eye store, but to go into the jewelry store? And this is one component piece of the story we need to start telling in the downstream because there is net new value to be created. I am absolutely convinced of it. Some of it will be defensive, as in keep the value you have, and some of it will be net new. But I encourage you all to think a little bit more about the next 10 years is not going to be the last 20 years.
Sorry, Lisa.
Sorry, thank you. To your point in talking about, if you will, transfer, there actually is value in the transfer, although there may not be money, in the sense that what is passed on is not simply a thing, but it's also a taste, criteria, values as to what matter, etc. And so one of the things I would say is that we can't ignore in addition to focusing on our children, we can't ignore our peers, because they are buying these values, the choices they make, the reasons they make them. They're not only for themselves, but they'll probably be talking about that, if it's like my family, they'll be talking about it in their family. And that is another dimension of shaping the next generation. And it may not be technology, but in the nature versus nurture thing, nurture is pretty important. So I would say there is value in transfer, and ultimately value can become money.
And I think that the value, it's an indirect marketing, because if there's this transfer, people will also be likely to buy a new diamond or new piece because they know that there was this transfer somehow. So there's a positive point. I wanted to go back to the data, just so we don't get away from that. Data is a key point and a key fear. Back to fears. Talk only about fears, but that data should be managed, and I think all of us agree that somehow protecting our clients' data is what will keep us alive. If we don't do it, we die. That's the first thing. I've also been confronted with it for the EU. We are in the EU, with databases in the EU, with regulation under the EU. The only reason that EUPO, the European IP Protection, wants to work with us is because we are in the EU. But this is just because we have that luck. It's like to have everything there. But on the other side, I think that when we talk about standardization, there should also be at the moment, let's say, a protection about what data one day might be shared, because we might one day have governments that say you need to share anonymous data with us to be able to track and understand what's the impact in the origin country, what's the impact actually in the manufacturing country, and what's the impact of the consumer and the e-commerce or the movement. There is maybe more impact actually sometimes in some countries that we didn't expect. But long story short, one day this data, somebody will require that it becomes anonymously available for statistics. It's not the case yet. I feel it coming in some years. Maybe my partners here disagree, but I think it is going to come at the moment. I think so as well. There it should be very safely guarded. It's true that the data, the property of the data, at least for us, is the client's. And it has to be encrypted, and the data itself has to be encrypted. There's no way around, because if we don't give that trust, we lose our clients at some point.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Please join me in giving them a massive round of applause. Thank you for being on the panel together. I want to say, we have heard from Gaetano and others, it's the first time that everyone is sitting together, competitors are sitting together on a platform, so take a picture to prove it did happen. And Gaetano, thank you for having the vision to invite everybody to talk about progress and how we work together rather than compete. So much appreciated for your time.
Thank you very much. And the over conclusion is thank you for having been here. I want to acknowledge the presence of my good friend Tom Moses, Vice President of GIE, apart Pritesh here and all our friends here. The message of this last session of tomorrow is the following. This industry is much more united than what is perceived. We all work together despite our diversities and regardless of the diversities and different opinions. But then we come all together to discuss openly what we are going to do for the benefit of our industries and all our companies to make everything better and to do everything more. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steve.